They told him she was a monster. They said Beatrice Sterling didn't just fire people. She destroyed them. They said she looked at people like Jack Miller and saw nothing but dirt on her expensive shoes. But when you have a sick daughter and empty pockets, you don't get to choose your devils. Jack took the job no one dared to take, driving for the most ruthless, prejudiced billionaire in New York City. He expected the insults, he expected the cruelty. What he didn't expect was the secret that would turn both their lives into a war zone. This is the story of how a desperate single dad broke through the ice of a woman the world loved to hate, and the dangerous twist that changed everything. Buckle up. The waiting room of Sterling Industries felt less like a corporate office and more like a mausoleum for ambition. The floors were black marble, polished to such a mirrored sheen that Jack Miller could see the scuffs on his second-hand dress shoes every time he looked down. He tried to hide them by crossing his feet, tucking the worn leather beneath the chair, but the movement only drew the eye of the receptionist, a young man with a haircut that cost more than Jack's monthly rent. Jack checked his watch. He had been waiting for 3 hours. He needed this. God, he needed this. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from Mrs. Gable, the neighbor watching his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. "She's coughing again, Jack. The meds are low. When will you be back?" Jack swallowed the lump of anxiety in his throat. Lily's asthma was getting worse, and the specialists were talking about treatments that his meager veteran's pension and odd jobs couldn't touch. He was a former frantic tactical driver for private security firms in the Middle East, a man who had driven through mortar fire without sweating. But sitting here, in the silence of the 90th floor, he was terrified. The double doors swung open. A man walked out, looking ashen. He was weeping, actually weeping. He held a box of personal belongings, his hands trembling. "Next," a voice cut through the air. Jack stood up, straightening his cheap suit jacket. He walked into the office of Beatrice Sterling. The room was vast, dominated by a view of Manhattan that made the city look like a toy set. And there she was, Beatrice Sterling. The rumors didn't do her justice. She was in her late 50s, elegant in a way that felt sharp, like a knife made of diamond. She didn't look up from her tablet as Jack entered. "Name," she said. Her voice was low, raspy, and utterly bored. "Jack Miller, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am. It makes you sound like a servant, even if that is what you are applying to be." She finally looked up. Her eyes were a piercing, unnatural blue. She scanned him, not checking his resume, but checking him. Her gaze lingered on his knuckles, scarred from years of mechanics and fighting, and his neck, slightly sunburnt from working construction the week before. She sneered. It was subtle, but it was there. A curl of the lip. "HR sent me your file," she said, dropping the tablet on the desk with a clatter. "Military background? Dishonorable discharge?" "Honorable, Miss Sterling. Medical discharge. Shrapnel in the shoulder." "I don't like soldiers," she said, standing up and walking to the window, turning her back to him. "They tend to have a hero complex, and they tend to be rough. I require sophistication. Silence. Discretion." She turned back, her face hardening. "And frankly, Mr. Miller, people of your background usually struggle with the level of etiquette I require." Jack paused. He was white, but he grew up in the projects of Detroit. He knew exactly what she meant. She meant poor. She meant uneducated. She meant trash. He had heard the stories about Beatrice Sterling. She was old money, the kind that believed bloodlines mattered more than competence. She had been sued 3 times for discrimination, settling out of court each time to keep the press quiet. "I can drive anything with wheels, Miss Sterling," Jack said, keeping his voice steady, "and I know when to keep my mouth shut. You won't know I'm there." "I doubt that," she said coldly. "You smell like cheap detergent and desperation. It lingers." Jack's jaw tightened. He wanted to walk out. He wanted to tell this woman exactly where she could shove her job, But then he thought of Lily's inhaler, empty on the nightstand. "I need the job," Jack said, stripping the pride from his voice, "and I'm the best driver you'll find." Beatrice stared at him for a long, uncomfortable minute. She seemed to be weighing the entertainment value of hiring him against the annoyance of his presence. "My last driver lasted 4 days," she said. "He spoke when he wasn't spoken to. He played music I detested, and he looked me in the eye in the rearview mirror. Do that, and you are gone. The pay is $150,000 a year. No benefits for the first 6 months. Jack's heart stopped. $150,000. That would save Lily. "The trial period is 1 week, she continued, sitting back down and waving her hand dismissively. "If you survive the week, we'll discuss the contract. If you don't, well, don't expect severance. Be downstairs at 6 a.m. sharp. Do not be late. And Mr. Miller? Yes? Buy a better suit. You look like a public defender." The first 3 days were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Jack arrived at 5:45 a.m. every morning. The car was a custom-made Maybach, a beast of a machine that cost more than Jack's entire neighborhood. He kept it spotless. He checked the tire pressure, the oil, the suspension. He treated the car with the reverence of a holy relic. Beatrice, however, treated Jack like a piece of faulty equipment. Rule number 1, the partition was always up. Rule number 2, no eye contact in the mirror. Rule number 3, if she was on the phone, the car did not move until she gave the signal, even if they were in a no-parking zone. On Tuesday, Jack was idling outside a luxury boutique on 5th Avenue. Traffic was a nightmare. A police officer tapped on the window, gesturing for him to move. Beatrice was in the back, arguing viciously with someone on the phone. "I don't care what the board says, Charles," she screamed. "They are vultures, all of them. I built this company on my father's legacy, and I won't let a bunch of new money parasites tear it apart." Jack lowered the window a crack to speak to the officer. "Sir, I'm just waiting for—" "Move the vehicle, pal," the cop said. Jack tapped on the petition button. "Miss Sterling, the police are ordering us to move." The partition slid down an inch. "Did I tell you to speak?" she hissed. "Ma'am, he's writing a ticket. Let him write it. I pay more in taxes in a minute than he earns in a year. Pay the ticket and shut up." She slammed the partition shut. Jack took the ticket, his face burning. He watched her in the mirror, violating Rule #2, as she rubbed her temples. She looked exhausted, her face pale beneath the heavy makeup. For a second, she looked frail. Then she caught his eyes in the reflection. Her glare was so venomous, Jack immediately looked back at the road. The racism, or classism, or whatever toxic cocktail of prejudice she drank, came out in the quiet moments. On Wednesday, he was driving her to a gala in the Hamptons. It was a long drive. She had a guest with her, a man named Arthur Pendleton, a slimy real estate mogul who laughed too loud. "So, where did you find this one, Beatrice?" Arthur asked, gesturing vaguely at the back of Jack's head. "He looks like he could bounce at a dive bar." "Oh, HR dug him up from some gutter," Beatrice replied, not even lowering her voice. "He's a veteran. You know how they are. They come back with their hands out, expecting the world to bow down because they held a rifle." "Dreadful," Arthur chuckled. "My nephew joined the Marines. A total waste of an Ivy League education. I told him, leave the fighting to the ones who don't have a future anyway." Jack's knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. The leather groaned under his grip. "Don't have a future." He thought of the men he served with. Good men. Men who died in the dust so people like Arthur and Beatrice could sip champagne in a climate-controlled Maybach. "He drives well enough, I suppose," Beatrice sighed, though I suspect he struggles to read the street signs. Laughter. Cruel, clinking laughter. Jack took a deep breath. For Lily. For Lily. The breaking point almost came on Thursday. Jack had received a call from the doctor right before his shift. The new medication wasn't working. Lily needed a specialized nebulizer treatment, and the insurance, what little he had denied it. He needed $4,000 cash by Monday, or the treatment would be delayed. He was distracted. He missed a turn on the way to the airport. It added 5 minutes to the trip. When they arrived at the private hangar, Beatrice didn't get out immediately. She sat there, the silence in the car heavy and suffocating. "Open the door," she commanded over the intercom. Jack scrambled out and opened the rear door. Beatrice stepped out, wrapped in a fur coat that cost more than the nebulizer. She stopped, standing inches from him. She was short, but in that moment, she felt 10 feet tall. "You were late," she said softly. "I missed the turn, Miss Sterling. I apologize. The GPS rerouted. I don't care about the GPS. I care that my time is being wasted by an incompetent fool." She reached into her purse and pulled out a stack of $100 bills. She threw them on the ground at Jack's feet. "Pick it up," she said. Jack stared at her. "Excuse me? That's your severance. You're fired. I don't tolerate incompetence. Pick it up, take a cab back to the city, and leave the keys." Jack looked at the money scattering in the wind on the tarmac. It was thousands of dollars. Enough for the treatment, enough for rent. All he had to do was kneel. All he had to do was surrender his dignity to this woman who hated him for simply existing. He looked at her face. She was smiling, a cruel, small smile. She wanted to see him break. She wanted to prove to herself that everyone had a price, that the lower class were exactly what she thought they were, groveling dogs. Jack clenched his fists. The wind whipped his tie. He looked at the money, then at Beatrice. "Keep it," Jack said, his voice low and dangerous. "I'm not a dog, and you're not a queen. You're just a lonely, bitter old woman." He tossed the keys on the hood of the Maybach and turned to walk away. Beatrice's smile vanished. No one spoke to her like that. No one. "Wait," she snapped. Jack didn't stop. He kept walking toward the terminal gate. "I said wait!" she screamed, her voice cracking. Jack stopped. He didn't turn around. "You don't get to walk away from me," she yelled. She was trembling. "Get back in the car." "I thought I was fired," Jack said over his shoulder. "You are," she screamed. Then she paused. She looked at her private jet, then back at Jack. Her chest was heaving. "But my pilot just radioed. The flight is grounded due to a mechanical issue. I have a board meeting in the city in 2 hours. If I miss it, Charles wins." Jack turned around slowly. "Sounds like a personal problem." Beatrice looked at the money on the ground, then at Jack. She looked trapped. For the first time, the billionaire looked helpless. "Drive me back," she said, her voice tight. "Get me there in time, and you keep the job. And you can pick up the money. As a bonus, not severance." It was a test, or a trap. Or maybe, just maybe, it was desperation, recognizing desperation. Jack looked at the money. $4,000. Lily's lungs. He walked back, knelt down, and gathered the bills. He didn't look at her while he did it. He put the money in his pocket, stood up, and opened the door for her. "Get in," he said roughly. She got in. Jack got behind the wheel. He checked the time. 2 hours to get from Teterboro to Wall Street in rush-hour traffic. It was impossible. "Buckle up," Jack said to the rearview mirror. He slammed the car into gear. The engine roared. Jack drove like a man possessed. He didn't drive like a chauffeur. He drove like the tactical operator he used to be. He mounted curbs. He cut through alleyways that the Maybach had no business being in. He wove through traffic with millimeter precision, the speedometer rarely dropping below 80. In the back, Beatrice was silent. Usually she would be screaming at him to slow down, threatening to sue him. But today she was clutching the door handle, her eyes wide, watching the city blur past. She wasn't scared of the speed. She was watching him. They made it to the Sterling Tower with 4 minutes to spare. Jack screeched to a halt in front of the glass doors. He jumped out and opened her door. Beatrice stepped out. Her hair was slightly mussed, her face flushed. She looked alive. "Wait here," she said. It wasn't a question. She marched inside to fight for her company. Jack leaned against the car, the adrenaline fading, leaving him shaking. He touched the wad of cash in his pocket. He had done it. 2 hours later, Beatrice emerged. She wasn't alone. She was flanked by security, but she looked victorious. She walked straight to the car. "Did you win?" Jack asked as he opened the door. He surprised himself by asking. "I always win," she said, though her voice lacked its usual venom. "Take me home." The estate. The drive back to her estate in upstate New York was quiet. Night had fallen. The roads were dark and winding. Jack was tired. He was thinking about getting home to Lily. He checked the mirror. Beatrice was asleep. It was the first time he had seen her unguarded. She looked older, her face etched with deep lines of stress. Suddenly, headlights flooded the rearview mirror. High beams. Blinding. Jack squinted. An SUV was tailgating them aggressively. "Idiot," Jack muttered, tapping the brakes to signal them to back off. The SUV didn't back off. It accelerated. Bump! The heavy Maybach jolted forward. Jack's eyes snapped to the mirror. "Wake up!" he shouted. Beatrice jolted awake. "What? How dare you? Smash!" The SUV rammed them again, harder this time. The Maybach swerved. Jack fought the wheel, correcting the skid. "We're being hit!" Jack yelled. "Get down! Get on the floor!" "Who is it?" Beatrice screamed, panic rising in her voice. "I don't know, but they aren't here for an autograph." Jack floored it. The Maybach's V12 engine roared, but the SUV was modified. It kept pace. Another set of headlights appeared in front of them. A blockade. 2 sedans blocked the road, men standing with long guns. "Ambush," Jack whispered. It was a professional hit. He looked at Beatrice. She was curled on the floorboards, trembling. She was a billionaire, a titan of industry, a racist tyrant. But right now, she was just prey. "Listen to me," Jack said, his voice calm, the servant tone gone completely. "I'm going to spin the car. When I stop, you stay down. Do not move until I tell you." "Jack," she whispered. She used his first name. Jack didn't answer. He ripped the handbrake and cranked the wheel. The heavy car spun 180 degrees, tires screaming, smoke filling the air. He aimed the rear of the reinforced car at the blockade and slammed it into reverse. Crunch! The Maybach smashed through the sedan, blocking the road, metal shearing metal. The impact was brutal. Jack's head whipped back, but he kept driving, pushing the wrecked sedan out of the way, clearing a path. He spun the car back around, facing the way they came, but the SUV behind them was blocking the retreat. Men were pouring out of the vehicles. Gunshots rang out. Ping, ping, crack. The bulletproof glass spiderwebbed but held. "Hold on!" Jack yelled. He drove straight at the gunmen. They dove out of the way. He clipped the lead SUV, tearing its bumper off, and shot through the gap. They were free, but the SUV was turning around to pursue. "Call the police!" Jack shouted. "Miss Sterling, call them now!" "I can't." She was hyperventilating. "My phone. I dropped it." Jack grabbed his own cracked phone from the dash and tossed it back to her. "Dial 911. Tell them we are on Route 9, headed west, under attack." Jack focused on the road. The SUV was gaining. He knew this road. There was a narrow bridge coming up. "I'm going to lose them," Jack said. He killed the headlights. "What are you doing?" Beatrice screamed in the dark. "Driving," Jack said. He navigated by moonlight and memory. He saw the turn for the old service road at the last second. He yanked the wheel left. The car skidded onto gravel, kicking up dust. The pursuing SUV, blinded by the sudden darkness and dust, missed the turn. Jack watched in the rearview mirror as the SUV's brake lights flared too late. It smashed through the guardrail and tumbled down the embankment. Silence returned to the car, save for the heavy breathing of 2 terrified people and the ticking of the cooling engine. Jack slowed the car to a stop deep in the woods. He killed the engine. "Are you hit?" Jack asked, turning around. Beatrice pulled herself up onto the seat. She was shaking violently. Her perfect hair was a mess. She looked at Jack. "No," she whispered. "You saved me. It's the job." Jack said, his heart still hammering. "No," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of shock and realization. "My last driver would have run. The security team. They weren't there. You stayed." Jack looked at her. "I told you I don't run." Beatrice stared at him. The contempt was gone, replaced by confusion. She couldn't reconcile the man she thought he was, the trash, with the man who had just saved her life with the skill of a super spy. "Who are you, Jack Miller?" she asked. "Just a driver, Miss Sterling," Jack said. He started the car. "Let's get you home." But the night wasn't over. As they pulled back onto the main road, Beatrice's phone, which she had found on the floor, buzzed. A text message. She read it, and her face went white, whiter than before. "What is it?" Jack asked. She looked at him, her eyes filled with a new kind of terror. "It wasn't a kidnapping attempt," she whispered. "It was an assassination. And the text, it's from my head of security." "What does it say?" "It says, 'Did it work?'" Jack's blood ran cold. The call was coming from inside the house. "We can't go to your estate," Jack said. "If your security is in on it, walking in there is a death sentence." "Where do we go?" Beatrice asked, tears streaming down her face. "I have nowhere. They know all my properties. My friends. If Charles is behind this, he's turned them all." Jack looked at the road, then at the terrified woman in his back seat. He knew this was a bad idea, a terrible idea, but he couldn't leave her to die. "I know a place," Jack said. "They won't look for you there." "Where?" "The Bronx," Jack said. "My apartment." Beatrice Sterling, the billionaire queen of Fifth Avenue, looked at Jack Miller, the man she had called trash. "Take me," she said. The Bronx at 2 a.m. was a symphony of distant sirens and the low hum of streetlights that flickered more often than they shone. Jack steered the battered Maybach, now sporting a crumpled rear fender and missing side mirror, into an alleyway 3 blocks from his apartment building. He couldn't park it out front. A car like that in this neighborhood was a neon sign screaming, "Look at me!" "We walk from here," Jack said, killing the engine. He pulled a dark tarp from the trunk, part of his emergency kit, and threw it over the luxury sedan, weighing the corners down with loose bricks. It looked like a pile of trash, which was perfect camouflage for this street. Beatrice Sterling stepped out. Her Manolo Blahnik heels clicked on the cracked pavement. She wrapped her fur coat tighter around herself, eyeing the graffiti-covered walls with a mixture of horror and judgment. "You live here?" she asked, her nose wrinkling at the smell of stale garbage and damp concrete. "It's not Park Avenue, Miss Sterling. But it's got one thing your penthouse doesn't," Jack said, scanning the rooftops for movement. "And what is that?" "Me watching the door." He led her down the street, moving with a predator's grace, checking corners. Beatrice struggled to keep up, her expensive shoes punishing her with every step. She felt exposed, naked. For decades, she had moved through the world inside a bubble of wealth, private jets, VIP entrances, gated estates. Now, she was walking on the same sidewalk as the people she had spent a lifetime avoiding. They reached his building, a looming brick tenement with a heavy steel door that required a code and a good shove to open. The lobby smelled of bleach and old cooking oil. The elevator was out of order, a permanent under repair sign taped to it with yellowing Scotch tape. "4th floor," Jack said. Beatrice groaned. "I don't think I can." "You can. Or you can stay here and wait for the men with the assault rifles," Jack said, starting up the stairs. Beatrice followed. By the 3rd flight, she was gasping for air, her legs burning. It was a humiliating reminder of her own physical weakness. She controlled industries, but she couldn't climb stairs. Jack didn't offer to carry her. He stopped at the landings, waited for her to catch her breath, and then kept moving. He was treating her like a burden he had to transport, not a queen. Jack unlocked his apartment door. 3 deadbolts. He ushered her inside and locked them behind her. The apartment was small, tiny. The living room doubled as the dining room. There was a worn beige sofa, a TV that looked 10 years old, and piles of laundry folded neatly on a chair. But it was clean. Surprisingly clean. "Daddy?" A small voice drifted from the hallway. Jack's demeanor instantly shifted. The tactical hardness melted away, replaced by a desperate softness. He rushed to the bedroom doorway. "Hey, Ladybug," Jack whispered. "I'm home. Go back to sleep." "I heard voices," the girl said. She appeared in the doorway, clutching a worn-out stuffed rabbit. She was small for 6, her skin pale, dark circles under her eyes. She wore oversized flannel pajamas. Beatrice froze. She hadn't known he had a child. She assumed men like him spent their money on booze and gambling. She stared at the girl, and the girl stared back. "Who is she?" Lily asked, pointing a small finger at the woman in the fur coat standing in their living room. "Is she a princess?" Jack hesitated. "No, sweetie. This is my boss, Miss Sterling. She's going to stay with us for a little bit. Her house has plumbing issues." Beatrice stiffened. "Plumbing issues?" Lily walked over to Beatrice. She didn't seem intimidated. She looked up, her eyes wide and innocent. She didn't see the billionaire tyrant. She didn't know about the hostile takeovers or the lawsuits. "You look sad," Lily said. Beatrice blinked, taken aback. "I have had a long night." Lily held out the stuffed rabbit. "You can hold Mr. Hops. He helps when I have bad dreams." Beatrice looked down at the toy. It was cheap, threadbare, and clearly loved to death. It was likely the most valuable thing this child owned, and she was offering it to a stranger. Beatrice felt a lump form in her throat, a sensation she hadn't felt in years. She looked at Jack. He was watching her like a hawk, ready to intervene if she said anything cruel. Slowly, hesitantly, Beatrice reached out and took the rabbit. It smelled like lavender detergent. "Thank you," Beatrice said, her voice stiff but quiet. "Okay, back to bed, Lil," Jack said, scooping his daughter up. "Miss Sterling needs to sleep too." He tucked Lily in and returned to the living room. He tossed a blanket and a pillow onto the beige sofa. "Master bedroom is taken," Jack said dryly. "Bathroom is down the hall. Don't drink the tap water without the filter. And give me your phone." "My phone? Absolutely not. I need to check my emails. You need to stay alive," Jack cut her off. "They can track the GPS. They can ping the towers. If you turn that on, you bring a drone strike down on my daughter's head. Give it to me." "No." Beatrice clutched the phone. It was her lifeline, her connection to a power. Without it, she was just an old woman on a lumpy couch in the Bronx. "Do you want to survive to fire me another day?" Jack asked. "Or do you want to die right now?" She handed him the phone. Jack pulled the battery out. It was an older, secure model, and shoved the pieces into a Faraday bag he pulled from a drawer. "Get some sleep," Jack said, sitting in a wooden chair facing the door. He placed a handgun on the table next to him. "I'll take the first watch." Beatrice sat on the couch. The springs dug into her back. The fur coat felt heavy and ridiculous in this room. She looked at the stuffed rabbit in her hand. She looked at the man guarding the door. The man she had humiliated just hours ago. She lay down, pulling the scratchy blanket up to her chin. For the first time in 40 years, Beatrice Sterling cried herself to sleep. Morning came with the smell of burnt toast and the sound of cartoons. Beatrice woke up with a stiff neck. For a moment, she forgot where she was. She reached for the bedside bell to summon her maid, but her hand hit the rough fabric of the sofa. The memories crashed back. The ambush, the crash, the Bronx. She sat up. Jack was in the kitchen, a tiny nook separated from the living room by a counter. He was making eggs. He wore a grey t-shirt that showed the scars on his arms. "Coffee's instant," he said without turning around. "Sugar is on the table." Beatrice stood up, smoothing her wrinkled skirt. She felt grimy. "I don't drink instant coffee." "Then you drink water," Jack said. He plated the eggs and set them on the small table. Lily was already eating, swinging her legs. "Good morning, Miss Princess." Lily chirped. Beatrice sat down gingerly. "Good morning, child, and it's Miss Sterling." "Miss Starling," Lily repeated. "Like the bird? Sterling. Like the silver." Jack sat down, placing a laptop on the table. It was a ruggedized, tough book, something military grade. "We have work to do," Jack said, ignoring the breakfast banter. "I called in a favor. A buddy of mine, Sal, works in cybersecurity. I had him trace the number that sent you that text." Beatrice leaned forward, her hunger for business overriding her hunger for food. "And? Burner phone. Untraceable." "But," Jack tapped a key, turning the screen toward her, "Sal dug into the security logs of your estate. The cameras were disabled from the inside at 6 p.m. yesterday, using a master override code." "Only 3 people have that code," Beatrice whispered. "Me, my head of security, Vance. And," she trailed off. Her face went pale. "And," Jack pressed, "my stepson, Charles." "The one you were fighting on the phone?" Beatrice nodded slowly. "Charles has been trying to push me out of the CEO chair for 5 years. He says I'm out of touch. He says the company needs new blood." I thought he meant he wanted to vote me out. "I didn't think he meant literal blood," Jack finished. "He manages the private accounts," Beatrice said, her mind racing. "If he paid for a hit squad, the money had to come from somewhere. He's not smart enough to hide it perfectly. He's greedy." "Can you access the ledgers?" Jack asked. "Not without my security token. It's in the office. In Manhattan?" "We can't go back to the office," Jack said. "It'll be swarming with his goons." Beatrice looked at the screen. "I have a back door. I built it into the system years ago, just in case. I need a secure connection." Jack pushed the laptop to her. "It's routed through 3 VPNs and a proxy in Estonia. It's secure." Beatrice's fingers flew across the keyboard. In this moment, she wasn't the frail old woman or the refugee. She was the shark. She navigated the complex interface of Sterling Industries with blind familiarity. "Here," she pointed, "look at this. Consulting fees paid to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. $5 million transferred yesterday morning." Jack looked at the recipient name. Argus Security Solutions. "I know them," Jack said, his voice grim. "They aren't consultants. They're mercenaries. Ex-special forces who got kicked out for being too violent. They don't do security. They do wet work." "He paid $5 million to have me killed," Beatrice said. Her voice broke, but not with sadness. With rage. "That ungrateful, mediocre little parasite." "We have proof," Jack said. "We can go to the FBI." "No," Beatrice snapped. "The FBI will freeze the assets. The stock will tank. The board will panic. If I go to the authorities, I lose the company. Charles wins the narrative. He'll spin it that I'm senile and paranoid." "So what do we do?" Jack asked. "You want to just ask him nicely to stop trying to murder you?" "No," Beatrice said, her eyes turning into shards of ice. "I want to destroy him. I want to walk into the shareholder meeting tomorrow at noon, look him in the eye, and bury him. But I can't do that if I'm dead." "Tomorrow at noon," Jack checked his watch. "That gives us 24 hours. But Charles knows you're alive. The hit squad failed. He'll be hunting you." Just then, Jack's phone, his personal one, buzzed. He looked at it. A text from Mrs. Gable, the neighbor. "Jack, there's a black van parked across the street. Men in suits asking about a Miss Sterling. They showed a picture." Jack's eyes widened. He looked at the window. He moved to the side, peering through the blinds. Down on the street, 2 black SUVs were idling. Men were getting out. They wore tactical vests under trench coats. They weren't hiding anymore. "How did they find us?" Beatrice gasped. Jack looked at Lily, who was happily eating her toast. He looked at her asthma inhaler on the table. "The pharmacy," Jack cursed. "I picked up Lily's prescription yesterday before I came to work. The system is linked to my address. If they ran a background check on me, they know where I live." He turned to Beatrice. "We have to go. Now." "Where?" "Roof," Jack said. He grabbed a duffel bag from the closet. His go bag. He stuffed the laptop inside. He grabbed a heavy coat and threw it at Beatrice. Put this on. Lily, get your shoes. We're playing the quiet game. Lily sensed the fear in the room. She dropped her toast and ran to get her sneakers. Jack racked the slide of his handgun. He looked at Beatrice. Miss Sterling, he said, you wanted to see what a soldier does. You're about to find out. Do exactly what I say or we all die. Beatrice nodded. She was terrified, but looking at Jack, standing between the door and her, between the monsters and his daughter, she felt a strange surge of confidence. Lead the way, she said. The hallway was quiet, but it was the quiet before a storm. Jack led them not to the main stairs, but to the service ladder at the end of the hall that led to the roof. Up, Jack commanded. Beatrice looked at the rusty iron rungs. I can't climb that. Climb or die, Beatrice, Jack hissed. It was the first time he used her first name without a title. The shock of it spurred her into motion. She kicked off her heels, leaving $800 shoes on the dirty floor, and began to climb in her stocking feet. Jack handed Lily up to her once she reached the top, then vaulted up himself. He kicked the hatch shut and jammed a piece of rebar through the handle to seal it. They were on the roof. The wind was whipping, cold and biting. The Bronx sprawled out around them, a jungle of brick and water towers. They'll be coming up the stairs, Jack said, scanning the adjacent roofs. We need to cross over. The buildings in this block were built close together, but there was still a 3-foot gap between Jack's building and the next. A 3-foot drop to the alley, 5 stories below. We have to jump, Jack said. Beatrice looked at the gap. It looked like the Grand Canyon. You're insane. I'll go first with Lily, Jack said. He strapped the backpack tight, held Lily close to his chest, and backed up. Hold on, monkey, he whispered to his daughter. He ran and leapt. He cleared the gap easily, landing in a roll on the gravel of the next roof. He stood up and set Lily down behind a ventilation unit. Your turn, Jack yelled over the wind. Beatrice stood on the edge. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked down at the alley. It was a death drop. Crash! The sound of the roof hatch being battered from below echoed. They were breaking through. Jump! Jack screamed. Don't think, just jump! Beatrice looked at Jack. He had his hand out. She closed her eyes, thought of Charles sitting in her chair, laughing at her obituary. The rage gave her wings. She ran. She pushed off the edge with everything she had. For a second, she was flying. Then she hit the other side, hard, her shins slammed into the parapet wall. She gasped in pain, slipping backward. Jack lunged. His hand clamped around her wrist. His grip was iron. He hauled her up and over the wall onto the gravel. Beatrice lay there, gasping, her legs throbbing. I made it. Not yet, Jack said. Move! They scrambled across the rooftops, crossing 3 buildings until they reached a fire escape that led down into a different alley, a block away from the front of Jack's building. They descended the rattling metal stairs. Beatrice's feet were bleeding through her stockings, but she didn't complain. She was running on pure adrenaline. They hit the ground. Jack scanned the alley. It was empty. We need wheels, Jack said. He spotted a beat-up Ford E-Series van parked behind a bodega. It belonged to the owner, Mr. Hernandez. Jack knew him. He knew where the spare key was, hidden in the magnetic box under the wheel well. Get in, Jack said, unlocking the van. It smelled of plantains and cardboard. As they piled in, a black SUV screeched around the corner. There, a voice shouted. Jack jammed the key in the ignition. The engine sputtered. Come on, Jack roared. The engine roared to life. Jack threw it into reverse, slamming into a dumpster to clear a path, then shifted to drive. The SUV opened fire. Bullets punched holes in the back doors of the van. Get down, Beatrice screamed, shielding Lily with her own body. She pulled the fur coat over the child, covering her completely. Jack stomped on the gas. The van was heavy and slow, but Jack drove it like a rally car. He fishtailed onto the main road, cutting off a city bus which served as a momentary shield against the shooters. Where are we going? Beatrice yelled from the floor of the van. "The subway tunnels," Jack said. "There's an old maintenance entrance near the Yankee Stadium. If we can get underground, we lose the GPS tracking. We lose the helicopters." "Helicopters? Look up." Beatrice peered out the window. A dark chopper was circling low. Charles wasn't just using mercenaries. He was using corporate surveillance assets. Jack weaved through the Bronx traffic, running red lights, scraping against parked cars. The van shuddered with every impact. "They're gaining!" Jack yelled. In the side mirror, 2 SUVs were weaving through traffic, closing the distance. A man was leaning out the window of the lead car, aiming a submachine gun. "Jack!" Beatrice screamed. "I see him!" Jack saw a construction site ahead. A road crew was digging up the street. There were concrete barriers. Jack didn't slow down. He aimed for the gap between the barriers. It was tight, too tight for the SUVs. "Hold on!" The van screeched through the gap, sparks flying as the sides ground against the concrete. The side mirrors were ripped off. The lead SUV tried to follow. It clipped the barrier at 60 miles an hour. The SUV flipped, cartwheeling into the air in a shower of glass and metal. The second SUV slammed on the brakes to avoid the wreck. Jack drifted the van around a corner and shot down a ramp marked "Authorized Personnel Only." He drove deep into the darkness of the service tunnel, the daylight fading behind them. He kept driving until the road turned to dirt and then to old cobblestone. Finally, deep beneath the city, he stopped. Silence. Absolute, ringing silence. Jack turned off the engine. He slumped over the steering wheel, breathing hard. Are we safe?" Lily's muffled voice came from under the coat. Beatrice pulled the coat back. She stroked the girl's hair. Her hand was shaking, but her touch was gentle. "Yes, little one," Beatrice said softly. "We are safe." She looked at Jack. He turned to face her. His face was streaked with sweat and grime. "You drive well," Beatrice said. It was the biggest compliment she had ever given anyone. Jack managed a weak smile. "Told you, I can drive anything with wheels." "We have to get to that meeting," Beatrice said, her voice hardening again. "Tomorrow, noon." "We're stuck in a tunnel in a stolen van," Jack said. "We have no phones, no money, and an army waiting for us topside." Beatrice reached into the lining of her fur coat. She ripped a seam open. From inside the silk lining, she pulled out a small velvet pouch. She opened it, revealing a necklace. Diamonds and sapphires. "This is worth $2 million, she said. "It's my emergency fund. I assume you no offense?" Jack looked at the diamonds. He looked at Beatrice. "I know a guy in Queens," Jack said. "Good," Beatrice said. "Sell it. We need a new car. We need suits. And we need weapons." She looked at Jack, her blue eyes blazing in the dim dashboard light. "I am going to take back my company, Jack, and you are going to drive me to the front door." The basement of the pawn shop in Queens smelled of incense and metal polish. The fence, a man named Old Vinny, who had known Jack since his days running security for local businesses, looked at the sapphire necklace under a jeweler's loupe. His hands shook slightly. "Jack, this is Royal Jewels level stuff," Vinny whispered. "If I move this, it attracts heat. Melt the gold, pop the stones. Move them separate," Beatrice said from the corner. She was wearing a pair of oversized mechanic's coveralls she had found in the van, sleeves rolled up. She looked ridiculous, yet somehow more commanding than ever. "I don't care about the art. I need cash. Clean, untraceable cash. And I need it in an hour." Vinny looked at Jack. Jack nodded. "Do it, Vinny." They walked out with a duffel bag containing $600,000 in cash. It was a fraction of the necklace's worth, but it was war funds. Their next stop was a high-end menswear store in Brooklyn, one that didn't ask questions if you paid cash. Jack bought a sharp, slate-grey suit that fit him like armor. Beatrice bought a white power suit, crisp and blinding. Then they went to a hardware store. Jack didn't buy guns. He couldn't risk a felony charge while protecting Lily. He bought tools, High-power flashlights, zip ties, road flares, and a specific type of industrial solvent. "What is that for?" Beatrice asked as he loaded the van. "Distraction," Jack said. "We can't shoot our way into the Sterling Tower. We have to walk in." The Sterling Tower, Manhattan, 11:45 a.m. The shareholder meeting was the event of the year. The boardroom was packed. The media was camped outside. Charles Sterling stood at the head of the massive mahogany table, looking solemn and appropriately grieved. "It is with a heavy heart," Charles began, his voice practiced and smooth, "that I assume the role of interim CEO. My stepmother, Beatrice, has been missing for 48 hours. The police fear the worst. Her erratic behavior in recent months." The board members nodded. They were vultures, ready to pick the carcass clean. Outside, the street was chaotic. A delivery truck, the beat-up Ford van, now washed and polished as best as possible, pulled up to the loading dock. Security stopped them. "Manifest?" the guard asked. Jack rolled down the window. He was wearing the suit. He looked like a CEO's bodyguard, not a delivery driver. "Miss Sterling left her presentation materials in storage," Jack said calmly. "We're bringing them up." "Miss Sterling is missing, pal," the guard said, reaching for his radio. "Is she?" Jack asked. At that moment, the back door of the van flew open. Beatrice stepped out. She looked immaculate. The white suit shone in the gloomy loading dock. She didn't look like a woman who had slept in a Bronx apartment and jumped off a roof. She looked like the Queen of England. "Open the gate, Stevens," Beatrice said. She knew the guard's name. The guard's jaw dropped. "Miss Sterling? Open it, or you're fired before I hit the elevator button." The gate opened. They moved through the building like ghosts. Beatrice's security clearance had been revoked by Charles, but Jack had anticipated that. He didn't use the elevators. He used the fire stairs, bypassing the electronic checkpoints. 90 floors. Beatrice climbed. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed from the roof jump the day before. But she didn't stop. Jack carried Lily on his back in a carrier, and he offered his arm to Beatrice. She took it. They climbed together, 12:05 p.m. The boardroom. "I move for an immediate vote of confidence," Charles said, "to stabilize the stock." "Seconded," said Arthur Pendleton, the man who had mocked Jack days earlier. "All in favor." "I object," a voice rang out. The double doors didn't just open, they were kicked open. Jack Miller stepped in, filling the doorway. He looked terrifying. Behind him, Beatrice Sterling walked in. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. "Beatrice?" Charles stammered. He looked like he had seen a ghost. His face went grey. "You thought I was dead?" Beatrice walked to the head of the table. "I apologize for the disappointment, Charles." She threw the duffel bag on the table. It landed with a heavy thud. "What is this?" Arthur asked. "Evidence," Beatrice said. She plugged a USB drive, from Jack's laptop, into the presentation system. The screen behind her flickered. Instead of stock charts, it showed the bank transfer logs, the payment to Argus Security, the text messages authorizing the hit, the surveillance photos of the ambush. "This is a lie!" Charles screamed, standing up. "She's senile! She's forged this!" "Sit down, Charles," Jack said. He didn't shout. He just spoke. And Charles sat. Beatrice looked at the board. She looked at the people who had sneered at her, the people who called her a tyrant. "I am a difficult woman," Beatrice said. Her voice was steady. "I am demanding. I am arrogant. And yes, I have been cruel." She looked at Jack, standing by the door, holding the hand of his little girl. "But I have learned something in the last 2 days," she continued. "I learned that loyalty isn't bought, it's earned. I learned that the people I looked down on, the drivers, the soldiers, the help, are the only reason this city stands, and the only reason I am breathing." She pointed a manicured finger at Charles. "You are fired, Charles. Security is waiting outside. The real police, not your mercenaries." As if on cue, NYPD detectives entered the room. Jack had called them 5 minutes ago. Charles was dragged out, screaming threats. The board members sat in stunned silence, terrified they would be next. Beatrice looked at them. "Meeting adjourned? Get out!" They scrambled for the exits. When the room was empty, Beatrice slumped into a chair. The adrenaline crashed. She looked small again. Jack walked over. "You okay?" "No," she said softly. "But I won." "Yeah," Jack said. "You won." "Jack," she said, looking up at him. "The contract." "The trial period isn't up yet," Jack joked. "Screw the trial period. I'm tearing up the old contract." Jack stiffened. "So I'm fired?" "No," Beatrice said. She pulled a piece of paper from her pocket, hotel stationery she had scribbled on in the van. "New terms, triple the salary, full benefits starting yesterday, full medical coverage for your daughter, including specialists at Mount Sinai, and I want to establish a scholarship fund for veterans." Jack stared at her. His eyes stung. "Miss Sterling." "And one more thing," she said, standing up. She walked over to Lily, who was hiding behind Jack's leg. Beatrice knelt down. She didn't care about the white suit getting dirty. "Lily," she said, "thank you for lending me Mr. Hobbs. He was very brave." Lily smiled. "He likes you." "I like him too," Beatrice said. She looked up at Jack. The ice in her eyes was gone. "And Jack, you can call me Beatrice, when we're not in public." 6 months later. The car pulled up to the elementary school. It was a new Maybach, armored and sleek. Jack got out and opened the back door. But it wasn't Beatrice who got out. It was Lily. She was wearing a backpack, looking healthy, her cheeks pink. The new treatments were working perfectly. "Bye, Daddy. Bye, Auntie B," Lily yelled, running toward the school gate. In the back seat, Beatrice Sterling lowered her tablet. She watched the girl run. "She's fast," Beatrice noted. "She takes after her dad," Jack said, getting back into the driver's seat. "Drive, Jack," Beatrice said, a small smile playing on her lips. "We have an empire to run, and I believe we are late for lunch." "Not on my watch, Beatrice," Jack said. He checked the mirror. She didn't scold him for the eye contact. She winked. The partition stayed down. And that is the story of Jack and Beatrice. What started as a job out of desperation became a bond that saved 2 lives. It proves that sometimes the monsters we hear about are just people trapped in their own castles, waiting for someone brave enough to knock down the door. Beatrice learned that money can buy safety, but it can't buy loyalty. And Jack learned that even the coldest hearts can melt. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done in Jack's shoes? Would you have taken the money on the tarmac and walked away? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.